date, the authorities are repressing politicians, lawyers, and journalists, said Ahmed Kameri, a senior official in the Ennahda Party, a member of the Salvation Front, which is organizing the protest. The storming of the lawyers' headquarters yesterday is a dangerous precedent that perpetuates the authoritarian regime, he added. Abir Musa, one of the most prominent candidates, has been in prison for months, while Mondir Zanaidi announced his candidacy for a possible election from France amid expectations that he would be arrested if he returned to Tunisia. Side, without specifying to whom he was referring, accused potential candidates of being traitors and seeking protection abroad. Niger's Prime Minister Ali Mohamed Zein said on Saturday that Benin's blockade of Niger's oil exports, imposed in response to a border closure, violated trade agreements between the two countries and with Niger's Chinese partners. Speaking at a press conference in the capital Niamey, Zein said Niger could not fully reopen its border with Benin for security comments that escalates a dispute that saw Benin this week block supplies of Niger's crude oil to ship imports. The blockade jeopardizes landlocked Niger's plan to start crude exports under a $400 million deal with state-owned oil major China National Petroleum Corp. Important because Niger has said it would use funds from the export deal to fund bond payments missed while under regionally imposed sanctions. Zein said the blockade was in violation of about a dozen accords signed by Benin, Niger, and the Chinese side relating to a recently launched Petro-China-backed pipeline linking Niger's Agadem oil field to the Benin port of Cotonou. But Benin has said it will only back down once Niger reopens its border to goods from Benin and normalizes relations. Zein said one of the oil export accords stipulated that Benin could not unilaterally modify or limit the agreements in any way possible without the consent of the other parties. This means that the country agreed not to take any decision that would stop the flow of Niger's crude oil to the international market. This is serious. This is a violation of an agreement, he said at a press conference. Relations between the two countries have been strained since the July 2023 coup in Niger led the West African regional bloc ECOWAS to impose strict sanctions for more than 6 months. What happens next is unclear. Zein said Niger would not comply with Benin's request to fully reopen its border. In Benin's territory, there are bases wherein some territories are trained to come and destabilize our country. So it is simple for security reasons that we decided to maintain the border closure, Zein said without giving any further detail on the allegations. We will reopen the border when we are certain that our territory is secured. Niger is battling a decade-old insurgencies led by armed groups linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, which are seeking to expand their reach into the coastal countries from the Central Sahel region, which includes Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Pushed further teams to some of the bombed areas because of the intensity of the Israeli bombardment, but they have reports of fatalities. In Rafah, near the border with Egypt, Israel stepped up aerial and ground bombardments on the eastern areas of the city, killing people in an airstrike on the house in the Brazil neighborhood. Residents said Israeli tanks have cut off the Salahuddin Road that bisects the eastern part of the city, while the eastern part of Rafah remained a ghost town. Southeast area of Rafah residents, the military sounded sirens several times in areas near Gaza, warning of potential Palestinian cross-border rockets and/or mortar launches. Late on Saturday, the Israeli military said forces operating in Jabalia were preventing Hamas, which rules Gaza, from re-establishing its military capabilities there. They were bombing everywhere, including near schools that are housing people who lost their houses, Jabalia resident Saeed, 45, said via a chat app on Sunday. War is restarting. This is how it looks in Jabalia. The death toll in Israel's military operation in Gaza has now passed at least 35,000 Palestinians, according to Gaza's health ministry. The bombardment has laid waste to the coastal enclave and caused. Don't forget that we are doctors and we are working, Haddad said. Israel sent tanks killing 19 people and wounding dozens of others, Palestinian health officials said. Palestinians, according to Gaza's health ministry, the bombardment has laid waste to the coastal enclave and caused a deep humanitarian crisis. It was triggered by a Hamas-led said, was restarting. This is how it looks in Jabalia. The army sent tanks back into Satan as well as Al Sabra, where residents also reported heavy bombardment that destroyed several houses, including high-rise residential buildings. The army had claimed to have gained control of most of these areas months ago. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Enclave. The Israeli Defense Forces said air sirens had sounded what it calls unconditional support for Israel by the West. Ankara has halted all and said Hamas had accepted a ceasefire proposal by Qatar and Egypt in a step in the path towards a lasting ceasefire, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government did not want the war to end. The response of the Netanyahu government was to attack the innocent people in Rafah, he said, referring to the Gazan city that Israel is targeting. It has become clear who sides with peace and dialogue and who wants clashes continuing and more bloodshed. And did Netanyahu see any serious reaction for his sport behavior? No, neither Europe nor America showed a reaction that would force Israel into a ceasefire. Erdogan's intelligence chief Ibrahim Kalin met with Hamas leaders in Doha on Sunday to discuss ceasefire talks and the access of humanitarian aid into Gaza, a Turkish security source said. Israel's military conduct in Gaza has in the enclave mount. Its planned assault on Rafah, hosting some 1.4 million Palestinians, mostly displaced in the war, has helped fuel the deepest tensions in relations between Israel and its main ally, Washington, in generations. Ankara on Friday welcomed the United Nations General Assembly's backing for a Palestinian bid to become a full UN member. Erdogan on Sunday called on countries not recognizing a Palestinian sovereign state to do so after the vote, but slammed Washington and others who voted against. We saw that countries who lecture us on human rights and freedom at every opportunity openly support those who massacred 35,000 Gazans, he said, citing figures from Gaza's health ministry. We saw that action in 2007, the Palestinian Authority, which is dominated by Fatah, continues to fund some health and education services in the enclave. South Korea's financial watchdog said on Monday it was expanding and toughening the assessment of real estate price 2021, according to FSS. Under the new guidelines, which will come into effect from June, more loans and financial institutions will be subject to profitability assessments related to real estate projects with more detailed criteria for better evaluation of risk. The FSS also said it would tighten its supervision of financial institutions to make sure they follow up actions on real estate projects over default risk after assessment. To help ensure a soft landing for the real estate market, commercial banks and insurance firms have prepared a syndicated loan of 1 trillion won The funds would be used to ensure there is sufficient demand and liquidity during the restructuring process, and the amount could be raised to a maximum of 5 trillion won if needed, the FSS said. The Philippine Coast Guard is committed to sustaining a presence in a disputed area of the South China Sea to ensure China does not carry out reclamation activities at the Sabina Shoal, its spokesperson said on Monday. The Coast Guard said on Saturday it had deployed a ship to Sabina Shoal, where it accused China of building an artificial island amid an escalating maritime row, adding 2 other vessels were in rotational deployment, covered piles of dead and crushed coral that had been dumped on the sandbars of Sabina Shoal, altering their sizes and elevation. PCG spokesperson Jay Tariela told a press conference on Monday that the Coast Guard had to make sure it was able to prevent China from carrying out a successful reclamation in Sabina Shoal. He said the Coast Guard was committed to maintaining a presence at the shoal, which Manila calls Escoda, located within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. The shoal is the rendezvous